What's up, everybody? It's your man Ant Walker here on the Walkout Network, presenting another edition of Unleashed, the panel discussion show. And I'm happy, as always, to introduce a fantastic group of gentlemen to talk about all things mixed martial arts alongside me. So we're going to introduce our special guest, who you've seen on this channel. You've seen me do a lot of talking, a lot of arguing, a lot of debating, and a lot of just poking fun, because he's the man, Captain Credential, who actually formerly Captain Credential. He's officially Petty Officer Credential. My
Wow.
former co-host
How do you
on the
turn off
trenches.
this thing? How do I get the fuck out of here?
my friend and your friend. He is Jason Burgos. Jason, how you feeling?
I mean, I'm feeling good. I mean, I clearly you didn't get enough on me on the Walk-On Network, and then you begged, you cried out for me. You said, "I need more Burgos on this show. We've got to up the ratings. We need Burgos," and Burgos is here.
Burgos was the only person available at this time.
No, facts. Listen, facts aren't necessary here. We don't need truth. Come on.
All right, so of course we always have the senior editor of Sherdog.com. He is the jack of all trades who's mastered them all, Mr. Ben Duffy. Ben, what's up, my man?
It's a good day to be a Houstonian. If you're tired of this, just understand that you only need to see it for about 2 more shows.
I should have worn one of my Nats hats.
Well, I was going to say, it's going to be a hell of a World Series. I'm really excited to see it, honestly.
No, it's not. Houston's going to kill him. Nat's going to get rolled over. Let's go Houston.
I said I was excited to see it.
I wish I was a baseball fan right now so I can get in on all the sparring back and forth, but we'll just assume that Jason's wrong because that's normally the case.
Well, all right, I'm not going for the Nats, baby.
All right, so of course the panel is anchored by the master of mathematics, the stat expert. He is Mr. Jay Petrie, also Sherdog.com. Jay, how are you feeling today, brother?
Feeling pretty good. I'm glad Burgos is gracing us with his presence. I'd like to say just a quick go Pats because we're on right now. And I'd like to give you guys my stat of the week. 14. In his home state of Massachusetts, Joe Lauzon has won 14 of his 15 fights in there. All 14 have come by finish. He loves that place.
That's a good one. I like that one.
That is a place where you do not want to stand across from Mr. Lauzon. All right. So of course, UFC Boston was kind of the main thing going on in the MMA world this weekend. I shouldn't even really say weekend because it was a Friday card and I really loved it. I actually felt like I had a weekend. Yeah. But that's a whole nother story. Yeah. So the main event, Dominick Reyes, he defeats Chris Weidman, knocks him out in a minute and a half in the first round. So swing or miss, fellas, and I'll start with you, Jason. Dominick Reyes is the guy that will finally beat Jon Jones.
I don't know. God, this is a tough one. This is like it's like Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre all over again. They're just such a high level above everyone else, and they've been tested by the various ways you're supposed to be tested and possibly lose, and they pass the test every single time. Like, I don't know. I mean, he's got the tools. He can wrestle. He's a good high level kickboxer. He's well rounded. He's confident. He's on. That's key. You need to go in there confident. Well rounded skill. Of the current light heavyweight talent pool, yeah, I think he's the best. Is he the guy to beat Jon Jones? My gut says no. When you have an all timer, you really can never pick against him. But crazy things happen. That's what makes combat sports so good. Maybe he can be the guy, and what a hell of a story that will be if he is.
All right, so Ben, can we promote Petty Officer credential to Sergeant? Is he right?
God.
I do agree with Jason here. I'm gonna give this one a miss, not because he might never beat Jon Jones, but I don't think he would right now. And what I've seen of his game, it's not something I see in the immediate future. And unfortunately, I have the feeling that he's just gonna kind of level up his way into a title shot before he's really ready to give Jon Jones, the best version of himself. It's such a weak division at the top, aging people that Jones has fought already. I mean, there's every chance that he's the next challenger, and it's a shame because he could do with another year and a half, 3 or 4 fights worth of seasoning.
Yeah, agreed. Jay, anything you want to add to that point?
Well, it's a miss on all counts, I guess. I I do want to, however, have a little caveat, a stat caveat.
Ooh.
So Burgos mentioned Anderson Silva. You think of these kind of fighters, they have that aura, they get in their heads. But you're kind of beaten before you go out there. Anthony Smith, he couldn't even get his game plan going. And he the best things he could do, he couldn't even really start them. But there's something interesting that there's a parallel between these. The first undefeated fighter that Anderson Silva ever faced when he was the champion after his ridiculous 16-win run was Chris Weidman. The Jon Jones has yet to meet an undefeated fighter as the champion. Dominick Reyes is currently 12-0. Does this mean he's the guy? Or is it just a weird stat I pulled out of my head? I don't know. But hey, it's worth looking at.
It's definitely something to think about. But I'm definitely leaning toward the direction that all three of you have concluded, where Dominick Reyes isn't the guy. But what I saw from Jon Jones in the Thiago Santos fight was kind of troubling, and not in the sense that he had genuine trouble handling Thiago Santos. I think he very clearly won that fight, even though some scorecards went the other way. I think it's that, going back to my old tinfoil hat theory, is that Jon Jones is going out there and just having fun in these really strange ways that aren't strategically the best thing to do to win a fight. To go out there against a guy like Thiago Santos and decide you're going to beat him just by throwing kicks and the occasional elbow and just ignoring every other element of the game because it's probably more fun for you in however his brain operates. It doesn't sound like the recipe for continued success, even if it achieves momentary thrills. So if my line of reasoning on Jon Jones is correct, and he goes in there with against Dominick Reyes and decides that he's going to do something other than the best possible thing to win him the fight, he might get a surprise. Keep in mind, like we brought up Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman. Anderson Silva was handily winning that fight until he wasn't, until he started playing around and he got himself clipped, and he hadn't been the same ever since. So if you put a dangerous person like Dominick Reyes, who has obviously the finishing power that he has, as big as he is, with a continued growth in his technical acumen, you could be spelling something really, really terrible. So it could be a horrible way to end your title reign. Ask Anderson Silva what that's like. So just one little nugget that I want to throw in there, but for all intents and purposes, picking against Jon Jones at this point is just pure lunacy. So
he'd have to go like head kick for head kick with Reyes. That's about the only thing.
Yeah, it would have to be
some. Come on.
Yeah, he would have to do something like that, which honestly, it wouldn't be that far out of the realm of possibility for me, considering the Thiago Santos fight.
I have a question for all of you. What division has become less interesting and almost predetermined? Light heavyweight in 2019, middleweight in that what's the Anderson Silva when he was fighting like Talis Latis and Damian Maia,
like 2007 to 2011 sort of range,
or like flyweight circa 2016-17. Which one has become less interesting? What was the least interesting of those? Because light heavyweight right now is becoming like those two. There's no threats.
No, middleweight during Anderson Silva's title reign was the worst of the three. Where just so many of his title defenses were just kind of head scratchers because it was just the best dude they could find.
Patrick Cote didn't blow your hair back?
He blew his knee out, though.
Yeah. It's a shame because but it was middleweight during that reign, and it's not taking anything away from Silva. He fought the best available guy every time out. Didn't turn down any fights, didn't pull out of any fights. He showed up, and what the variable was the kind of effort he put forth once he was in there. Because kind of like the Jon Jones thing, he appeared to be doing things in his own head to kind of entertain himself, just being in a different zone. Like the latest fight was terrible. The Cote fight was terrible. The Maia fight was terrible. And the psychology going on during the Maia fight would make a 30-page takeout article all its own, based in like Brazilian socio-economic, ethnic, like deep-rooted tensions. Like it was a weird fight. But yeah, middleweight by far.
Yeah, I'm kind of siding with you on that, and I think it's hard too to try to think of Jon Jones's reign in those terms, because he's already had the great rivalry with Daniel Cormier. He's had the back and forth war with Alexander Gustafsson in their first fight. So he kind of had some of those seminal moments that it took the end of Anderson Silva's title reign to because Chael Sonnen didn't come around until 2012 or something like that, to where they first met each other, or 2011 I think it was when they first met.
It's crazy how far less entertaining his second lap is around the division than the first. His first lap was unbelievable. His second lap has just been terrible.
Well, it's the names. I mean, that first lap had some of the greatest names.
All the champions, one by one.
Yeah, I mean, Rampage, Rashad, Machida, Shogun. Like we're talking about all-time great names, if not by their records and what they accomplished in the sport, by their name value and popularity. You know, he took out Vitor Belfort and Chael Sonnen, and granted they weren't deserving of light heavyweight title shots, but they were big names. They were big stars. Who had their own credentials behind them as well. So yeah, we got a lot of great things with Jones early. It's just like you said, this back half is, it's just they're doing what they can. At least it does look like the light heavyweight division is fostering some level of talent. Like we forgot about Jan Blachowicz. Like he's about to fight Jacare. Like that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And also too, I think it's also notable as we transition into the next topic here, that with Chris Weidman's loss now, Jones has lost these big fights that were supposed to take place between Weidman with Rockhold and the third DC fight. So, man, if you are Jon Jones right now, Israel Adesanya, let's keep pissing that man off. All right, so moving on to the next topic, the flip side of the Dominick Reyes coin is Chris Weidman. So a pretty bad result on his end. Now, do we think it's time for Weidman to hang it up there? I'll start with you, Jay.
You know, it's always a tough call to have the feeling of, okay, it's time for this fighter to retire. Weidman's 35, moving up to 205 for the first time since very early on in his career, when he did those little catchweight things and Ring of Combat. The early promotions he did. But otherwise, he's been middleweight. 5 knockouts in your last 6 fights, 5 knockout losses, and some of them, you know, in Sherdog Fight Finder speak, we have TKOs. Okay, those can be something. Then you have KO. You know, that's a consciousness ending finish most of the time, and many of those have been KOs. You know, you picture the Tekken logo, KO. This one was bad to me because of how it was administered. It was just a jackhammer straight left hand and 2, maybe 3 hammer fists, and he was out. And then he woke back up after 1 strike and sat up like a Halloween kind of sitting up thing. It's the only thing I want, if we're going to see Weidman fight again, is the one that probably most of us can think makes sense. A double retirement match with Luke Rockhold at 205. I don't want to say settle score, but just winner and loser leaves town. They hang it up. They ride off into the sunset together. And that way we can kind of move past it. I think that would be the best way to treat him if he takes on the fight.
Or it'll be like a double knockout when they tap gloves.
Yeah. The weigh-ins, when they bump heads, they knock each other out.
Yeah, like all right, Ben, is it time for Weidman to call it a career?
I hope so. You know, like my concern is always fight. You know, what kind of life are fighters going to have for themselves and their families after the sport? Because if all goes well, you've got another half of your life after you retire from competition, at least. You know, at what level are you there for your kids? At what level are you there for your wife? You know, the stories of CTE and long-term effects of brain damage are absolutely chilling, coming out of so many other sports. And the only thing that has spared us so far is that MMA is such a young sport. And I just, you know, kind of live in dread of the first really, really tragic story we have maybe 10 years from now. And, we kind of look back and try to point to, okay, when was it too many fights? When was it too much damage? How many punches did they take in practice going full speed, even after that was no longer considered best practices? So I wouldn't retire him if I was his boss. I don't know if I would, but I sure hope he decides to.
Yeah. Jason, any thoughts you want to share about this?
I mean, I have a lot of love for Chris Weidman because, for people watching from New York, he's from Long Island. Now, it's not technically like New York City, but it's close to New York City. It's not upstate. It's like, Niagara Falls, like Rashad and Jon Jones, that area. Like, he's like the New York City fight, like the really true New York City fight that really became big. I mean, there's Matt Sever too, but it was like at a different time, at least for me as a fan. So he was the one I latched onto. So yeah, it's you know what it feels like? It sort of feels like, and oddly enough, I was watching the Chuck and Tito documentary, the 30 for 30, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm. Watching those last few Chuck knockouts, like the Rashad knockout, the Franklin knockout, just ugly knockouts. Not like, oh, you got rocked, you got kind of down, you got stopped. Like just like reset.
Short circuit done. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's having those knockouts now. Like Ben said, like the shots it's not a lot of shots now that are knocking him out. It's not that anymore. And it's scary. And I've asked fighters about CTE and stuff like that. And if you haven't seen, watch the Junior Seau 30 for 30 and like the decline he goes through and the violent turns of a normal person, and I think Ben said we haven't seen it. In a way, Ben, I think we have. I think War Machine was probably maybe that first instance of maybe something like that. I mean, maybe not, but War Machine, Matt Hughes, we
just had Tony Ferguson going through his mental issues.
Yeah, like
like this is real. It's very real. Getting hit in the head is not healthy.
Yeah, and then seeing what happened with Junior Seau and stuff like that, like he seems like such a nice guy, nice family. Like I don't want to see that story. I don't want to see him Junior Seau and like I just don't want to see it. And it's tough. He's only 35. He's younger than me. Like he's a young man. So it's like I personally would like to see him stop, but it's hard to tell an athlete not to do it, and when that's all they know, and maybe in most cases all they can do.
Yeah, very, very good point on that end. I mean, Chris Weidman has had, and I get to this point sometimes when a fighter is as great as him, you had a career as great as him. Like he dethroned the greatest middleweight of all time, had some spectacular defenses of his title, like that Lyoto Machida fight was an absolute barn burner. That was an amazing fight. But since he lost that belt to Luke Rockhold, he has won a singular fight, and that was against Kelvin Gastelum, and he almost got finished in that fight.
Yes.
So for the past several years, there have been 6 times at least where Chris Weidman has been, if he hasn't been completely short-circuited, he's been about this close to it. And even like the Gastelum fight, he did eventually win, but he was doing well, very well, until taking that shot that dropped him. The Jacare fight, I thought from a technical standpoint, he looked better than ever. His hands looked crisper than ever in that fight, but it didn't matter because he got tagged and done.
Boom, right in the temple.
Yeah,
just like Liddell versus Franklin.
Yes,
exactly. Yes. So that's what when we see a case like BJ Penn running rampant and probably some brain issues contributing to what's going on with him. I'm looking at Chris Weidman, and I want him to be there for his family. I want him to be a husband and be a father, and being in the cage is all right. You've done everything you can in that realm. So I certainly hope that his family, his coaches, and everybody they're going to have some long conversations and some tough conversations, and make some difficult decisions about what's next. Because at this point, at 35, with the amount of mileage he has, not just concussion miles, but bodily injury. For all the breaks and surgeries and ripped tendons and everything else, is it worth it at this point? And from where I'm sitting now, it just doesn't seem like it's worth it anymore. All right, so now we're going to move on to someone who's making a lot of noise in the women's flyweight division, and that's Maycee Barber. So, gentlemen, just open discussion for the table here. Is she the future of 125?
Yes. Yeah. Maycee Barber is the future of the women's flyweight division. And, God, I hate when I find myself repeating the UFC's booth announcers, but the future might be now, or it might at least be sooner than we think. She seems to get a lot of flack for being kind of weird and manic and annoying, but guess what? Most 21-year-old women do annoy me. And just so we're clear, so do most 21-year-old men.
I was wondering if you were going to clean that up with that.
Well, I'm not even cleaning it up. I'm just clarifying. Most 21-year-olds are kind of annoying people.
That's the reason why we're married within our age group.
Yes.
And she's annoying in the way of a very driven, high-level athlete. If she had this demeanor and she was a tennis prodigy or a gymnast, nobody would blink. But she stands out from the pack at 125. But she is 21 years old. In the cage, it's not even like she needs that much more development. She is a well-rounded mixed martial artist. She is trained in all three phases of mixed martial arts since she was literally a child. And the weird controversy about like which of her belts are actually legit black belts aside, she has all three phases going, and she has some things that are unteachable and a lot of other fighters never learn, whether they're 21, 31, or 41. She has a level of killer instinct and finishing ability that a lot of fighters, even offensively gifted fighters, never pick up. And she knows what she's doing. Not this fight, but the previous one. I think it was the Aldrich fight, where she rocked her. Aldrich, kind of was dazed and went flying back against the cage. And Barber went charging after her, stopped a couple feet short of like actually putting her hands on her, and like squared herself up and like just destroyed her with strikes. And then afterwards she was like, I always hate watching fights where somebody rocks the other fighter and then just run up and clinch with him against the cage and give him time to recover. So I decided not to do that. No. How many fighters never learn to do that?
Yeah. And also notable that she was getting it handed to her earlier in that fight, and she battled back through adversity to get that stoppage. So good point there, Ben.
I mean, she's got a lot to prove. Robertson is the first, top 10, top 15 fighter she's taken on. But she's passed every test so far with flying colors. I don't think she's ready for Valentina Shevchenko by any stretch of the imagination. But, she's at most a couple fights away from getting her chance.
All right.
Yep. I'm with Duffy on that one. I am. I think the sky's the limit. Right now, she's had 3 performances in the UFC so far, 3 knockouts. She got rocked in the Aldrich fight in the first round. Aldrich hurt her. She clipped her. But she did the whole going through adversity and getting her bearings back, come back, and she came back and knocked out Aldrich in the second round. She's aggressive, a little reckless, but she's exciting to watch, and she has that spark, that not quite that war face, but she can scream when she's throwing punches. She really gets into it. I heard today on I think it was the Helwani show. It was the Helwani show. She sat down with him that she's looking to fight in December on 245. So I guess there's space on the cards after all. I don't know who she'd fight, and it's obviously not going to be for the belt. Most of the division's kind of locked up in fights right now. Maybe there's JoJo Calderwood, but she fought in September. Andrea Lee fought her, so that's another one. Carmouche just lost when she fought for the belt in August. Roxy's available. She's top 8. I would also really like to see her take a couple more fights. I don't know if you guys heard or saw, her glove had 8-0 written on it before she went out and fought. So she's, whatever drive she's got, keep it up, kid.
Molly McCann would be the perfect next fight for her.
Sold.
Yeah, I saw that.
And obviously they're right on the same schedule because, anything can happen in a fight, but tell me how you think it looks if she fights Calderwood or Modafferi.
Nah, I don't want near that.
Definitely not Modafferi. But Roxy, it all depends on Roxy can get her down. But if not, if she can stifle her like she did Antonina Shevchenko, maybe. But otherwise, get ugly.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious what it would look like against Jennifer Maia. Also, that sounds like a pretty intriguing matchup.
She's fighting.
She's got Chookagian.
Yeah. So with a lot of the division tied up and stuff, she may not get her wish on that card. It's already loaded with names, so they probably don't need her services really on that card. Well, what happened to Jason there?
Well, there's also Lauren Murphy. She has a win. She won in August too. She won by knockout over. The name escapes me, and I feel bad about it. But yeah, there are names, there's possibilities, and I think what's really important though is that she doesn't want to fight Shevchenko next. You know what I mean? She's been saying, she will get there. She wants to be the youngest champion in UFC history, but doesn't have to be in 3 months. So I think that's important. So I'm digging that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she seems to be doing a lot of the right things. So, yeah, like you said, keep it up. Curious as to what happens next. All right, so while we're waiting for Petty Officer Credential to rejoin the broadcast due to some technical issues, we're going to move on to our next segment, and that is my favorite one, the one titled so beautifully, I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons. And this is where we get to just share all of the things that shocked us the most about a very, very busy weekend in mixed martial arts. So, Ben, I'm going to start with you. What is your I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons moment for the week?
I am still just reeling from the entire colossal shit show around the Greg Hardy fight. This guy is going to set some sort of record for most, highest number of, creatively weird and terrible, ways to end a fight in UFC history. Whether he is a future contender, future champion, whether he should even be fighting in the UFC, which I've weighed in on ad nauseum. The whole inhaler thing is just beyond the pale. And I've seen some people, trying to lay blame at the foot of the regulator who told him it was okay to use the inhaler. And certainly blame is deserved there. That guy needs some training, if not a new job. But it doesn't excuse Hardy or his corner. Asking a regulator a question he was not expecting during a 1 minute break. Why did he even have the inhaler? It's just beyond the pale. I thought a no contest was the perfect solution, honestly. I don't think he should have been disqualified because, again, they asked, they asked the regulator, hey, this completely illegal inhaler that I happen to have here with me, is it okay if I use it? He used it. You can't let the wind stand. It absolutely helps. I don't know if anybody has ever had asthma or knows anybody with asthma, but if you are tired and your cardio is flagging, say, any heavyweight other than Prime Cain Velasquez after the first round, albuterol is absolutely a performance-enhancing substance in a much more drastic and immediate and meaningful way than cycling on and off steroids during your training camp.
Agreed.
I mean, it can take you from I'm going to lay down and die to I'm good to run another mile in literally seconds. That's what albuterol does. So you can't let the wind stand. It was absolutely a performance-enhancing substance, in a very extreme way. But he gets off one more time for not knowing the damn rules of the game.
So I'm going to call an audible here because this is supposed to be I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcon segment, but we should be talking about this a bit more because that was probably the most dramatic thing that happened over the weekend. So I'm going to do a little switcheroo on some of the speedback questions because 30 seconds is not enough time to address this. So I was completely floored by how clueless everyone seemed about this. That now granted it appears to be from the initial Twitter investigations that were going on during this event that I guess the Massachusetts State Commission doesn't have very clear defined rules about something that should be pretty obvious. You probably shouldn't be able to use medication in between rounds. And for everyone who says that yes, athletes with asthma, it's an equalizer. Totally understand that, but asthma medication is a performance enhancer. Let's take back the clock to I believe it was 1983. It's a boxing match between Louis Resto and Billy Collins Jr. This is an infamous fight for the amount of cheating that Resto and his corner did. Not only did they remove padding from his gloves to in order for him to hit harder, they also loaded his wraps with plaster of Paris, which created an even more of a severe bludgeoning tool to beat Billy Collins. But this was a back and forth fight, and in the last round, he takes a sip of his water in the corner and comes out like a bat out of hell with all sorts of energy and finishes the fight strong. Well, that water was spiked with asthma medication. Okay, so asthma medication was actually in the water, and it provided a cardio boost. So sounds to me like it's a performance enhancer. Hey, Jason, you'll see Jason is back, but I think your mic is set wrong.
I think your mic, you threw your mic out the window and it landed on the screen below.
Yeah.
What? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's probably the computer mic.
What?
Not
No.
your actual.
Let's see.
No, when he reached out and touched his mic, it definitely.
Okay. All right, there we go. That sounds a little better. Actually, no, that sounds terrible.
Hello.
All right. So before we continue with on-air mic checks, yeah, man, I think that we really should be questioning the I don't know, questioning everybody in this, because the commission should know better. Whoever that guy that said it was okay.
Like the training, it's a pretty quick flow chart. Is it water? Yes. Yeah. No. Yes.
Yeah, and like, because there's some commissions only allow water. Like you might be able to get like vitamin water. You might be able to get Gatorade in some states, but that's it. So where in the hell? Like next, we're gonna let you like rub TRT cream in between rounds. Like
get some Tiger Balm on your sore muscles.
Yeah, like you take an aspirin or something. Like where does it stop? Like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm all on board with this. I don't want to say I'm a hardliner because it's not the way I want to come down on it. But when it comes to fences in the cage, you have to have more of a strict liability approach, meaning intent shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter if you meant to do this thing or not, because you did it. Whether that means certain illegal strikes or ingesting certain substances during the fight. Accident or not, it is a clear performance-enhancing substance. I have a family member that has asthma. It's an immediate relief. Whatever it may be, it changed the course of the fight. You could visibly tell how he handled himself going into the corner versus coming out. It was almost a different fighter. But something I want to kind of look at. How did Dean Thomas not know? I will sort of blame him as his coach and corner man. How did Dean Thomas go, hey, maybe we should ask somebody, and not, no, it's never been ever okay, no matter where you are, ever, no matter what, the end, period. I have fought in low level martial arts, not mixed martial arts events, and know these things you can't do that. I write about this stuff for a living and know you can't take that kind of substance. Hey, I'm just a guy in a Hawaiian shirt having a good time here. Let's take a trip down memory lane and think of all the times that fighters in the UFC, Bellator, Pro Fighters League, One Championship, you name it, have puffed on an inhaler during the fight. How about none? And there is, however, a moment in UFC history that is almost comparable. Heath Herring fought Jake O'Brien many, many years ago, and before his fight, during his walkout, he took a puff of his inhaler because he has asthma. That was before the fight. And there is a big difference, though, before the fight and during the fight. Now, that was permissible because there's a certain window of you can have anything. And this was outside the, if you're in a fight, that's it. That's all you can have, guys. That's everything. You can't put anything in it and look in the bottom.
Not even like an emergency packet.
Nothing. You can't even have a sugar packet or anything like that. No caffeine, none of that stuff. So it's not. I don't know. I mean, when I say hardliner before, I meant you almost look to the DQ, because there's certain offenses that it had an immediate impact on the fight. It's strictly prohibited. You can't even, in Massachusetts, may be a little weird on some of the language or lack thereof. They very clearly say what you can and cannot bring to the cage as a cornerman. And there's only 12 things you can bring, like tape and Vaseline and stuff like that. Well, inhalers and medical supplements or or helpers or anything like that, that's not on the list. It's not on the guest list. So how could it possibly be okay in a fight unless somebody threw it in from the crowd and said, well, we didn't walk out with it. So no, you've got to shut it down all the way. So no contest. Okay, that's fine. Maybe you could have pushed a little harder. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, see, I think that as far as I can excuse the inhaler being present in a coach's pocket because, say he has an asthma attack in the middle of the fight, and so be it. Take a puff of that. Yeah, the fight's over with, but hey, you're alive, and that's what's more important. But like, I want to take this in a different direction, fellas, because we've talked a lot about Greg Hardy, and I think everyone in MMA media, a lot of fans have talked about him because of the controversy his name brings, and the UFC's insistence of continuing to promote him in high-profile spots. Now, with 2 out of his 4 fights being mired in some sort of regulatory controversy, is the Greg Hardy experiment even worth it anymore?
I was good with it before he stepped his foot in the cage, so it doesn't look any better in hindsight. I'll just say that.
I guess we got to know those like ratings or app purchases, because I don't know. I mean, controversy makes cash sometimes, so I don't know if there seems to be a boom when he's fighting. That UFC's not going to stop. I mean, they're not going to stop until he's knocked out cold 3 or 4 times in a row. He gets Weidman or something for a while, Otherwise, I just don't think they're gonna stop. I mean, it should. I mean, it should have stopped a while ago. It should have never started, at least at this point. But I don't get the sense this is still gonna stop. It might just draw more attention to him and just draw more eyeballs.
See, I'm only disagreeing because I did a tiny bit of homework. The numbers were not great for this card.
Okay.
What the heck? They didn't even come close to breaking 1 million views. It peaked at about 800,000 during the Weidman fight. So this isn't. So Greg Hardy isn't this is on ESPN2, a channel that most people get. Yeah. So if this didn't break 1 million, I'm not sure if he is the draw they think he is. I don't know. The people talk about him. There's buzz, but it doesn't it hasn't at least to this point hasn't translated to, God, I can't wait to watch a Greg Hardy fight so I can watch him get knocked out or knock somebody out. I don't know if we're there yet.
If he's not moving the needle in terms of views or buys, I think the UFC might decide sooner rather than later that maybe the juice here isn't worth the squeeze. I'm already on record as saying that somebody with his demonstrated record of inability to control violence in his private life and being unapologetic, and surly about it, probably shouldn't be in the professional violence business. He should not be making money to hone his skills at punching and choking people. Full stop. If I lose that ground and I have to retreat to the next round is any other 4-0, 5-1, 6-1 heavyweight in the UFC would be buried on the prelims of the worst cards. The fact that even a former NFL player, that he is getting these spotlight bookings is evidence that the UFC is playing off of his built-in fame. And what is he built-in most famous for? Domestic violence. It is just a cynical and ugly thing. I still wouldn't think he belongs in MMA, but I would feel differently about it if he were buried on the prelims. Being brought along by anybody else. But it is just the most cynical thing in the world to court the controversy, put him out there, and kind of hope that he gets hate views.
Well, we'll compare it to the Singapore card in a couple days that we'll get into. Jeff Hughes, 10-2, former LFA champion, is fighting Rafael Pessoa. And that's the first fight. That's the card opener at 5 a.m. in Singapore. 2 guys with vastly superior records, with track records that have proven themselves, that have won in the UFC or had the way to get there, is buried. Greg Hardy, yeah, there we go. Greg Hardy is on the main card still.
Yeah, and the thing that I find most ridiculous about this whole thing too is it's not even the controversy, it's not even the baggage that he brings with him into the octagon every time. It's the fact that he's actually grown as a mixed martial artist.
Yeah.
We see real development in him,
Yeah.
and he's looking like a decent fighter, except that now, like, once again, the results of rules being ignored or ignorantly violated or whatever the case may be have now tainted what he's been able to do in the cage, because now the first time you see him face any sort of adversity against Alan Crowder, what does he do? He knees the guy in the head when it's illegal, and what at least appeared to me to look like a temper tantrum. He has two fights after that where, like the Smoliakov fight, I'm not gonna spend any more time trashing the level of competition in that. I think I've done that quite enough. But then Juan Adams, a very legit win. He smokes him, and then the question was, okay, can he ever be more than a guy who's just going to spark you in the first 30 seconds with his athleticism? And just when you could see that, just when you're seeing defensive footwork, you're seeing a better shot selection, you're seeing things that are making a more complete fighter. Well, you can't really credit going the full 15 minutes if you needed an inhaler to do it. So we're in every way, shape, or form. If he's not bringing in the ratings, at least according to the stats you cited in this last event, if we can't trust the in-cage results, and it's mired in controversy anyway, just by what he brings with him by the name Greg Hardy, what's the point? All right, so.
I'm just really bitter and sad right now because I, of course, was cage side at UFC on ESPN4 in San Antonio earlier this year, and I was 10 feet away at the end of the Hardy and Adams fight. And let me tell you, that is not the way I wanted my mom to see me on ESPN for the first time. I am just right there, right behind them during the 15 replays of that knockout.
Do you remember there's a time that people were so shitty about Brock Lesnar being in the sport, but now we've had CM Punk, we've had Greg Hardy. Man, Brock Lesnar seems really interesting now, doesn't he? Brock Lesnar seems like Kimbo Slice seems like an amazing prospect now at this point compared to Greg Hardy and CM Punk. Seriously.
All right, fellas. So we're gonna move on to what I would prefer to call this the Petri dish, but we're gonna stick with the name Soapbox Derby for right now, and this is where we'll get to hear something that our resident stat man just has to get off his chest. The floor is yours.
Well, hopefully one of these days you all will join me in one of these rants, or one of these intellectual discussions. I'd like to prefer that these are. My thoughts aren't vitriolic, they aren't hostile, they aren't exhausted as they were last week's discussion, but my concerns are about Bellator 231 on Friday. Now, Bellator is doing a doubleheader, and this first card on Friday is headlined by a rematch between Frank Mir and Roy Nelson that we are getting because we're getting. So
wanted it.
So combine these two headliners, main event, last fight of the night, the biggest fight of the night, names, okay, cool, have lost their combined last 7 fights. 4 by knockout on combined. Frank Mir has gone 2-8 in his last 10, but Roy Nelson can beat him. He's got 3-7 in that span. Jesus. And they are headlining a card in 2019. Now, the card itself isn't stacked. Phil Davis, Carl Albertson, that's a good fight. It's a Bellator versus Ryzen type of situation. Carl Albertson with the kind of the curly afro from Ryzen, who fought in the open weight tournament in the beginning, is coming over to fight Phil Davis. So that's okay. That's an interesting fight. And then it kind of struggles, and the card just takes hit after hit. Beck Rawlings is on the main card in 2019. Now, Beck Rawlings is a 7-8, I believe is the last time I saw, a sub-500 fighter who had an interesting run in the UFC. And she left the sport, not just the UFC. She left the sport to fight 3 times in bare knuckle in the glorious BKFC promotion. She won them all. She won by knockout and then won a couple other times and defended her belt and is coming back now to MMA.
The female Artem Lobov, basically.
Yeah, exactly. On the high of 3 bare knuckle wins that will translate over into MMA. Absolutely. So then we have Jake Hager, star WWE. I think Jack Swagger, I think, is how most people will know who he is. WWE fame, is finally fighting a guy with a record above 500. He's also on the main card. Now, I think my concern, if anything, is the issue we have with UFC, as we've talked about many times in the past, putting together these cards that don't really spark your interest. No, there's a fighter here, there's a fighter here. Well, the difference is when Bellator does it, it's harder to get excited about when there are 15 fights in the card. Now, they have local fighters, local showcases. Okay, I dig it. Because they're selling tickets, they're getting people to the arena, they're getting excitement around the area. That's good, but is Bellator the place to have a guy making his pro debut against somebody that's 1-1? Is that something to put on the Bellator stage? I don't know. But as I mentioned, Beck Rawlings and those people are on the main card. Big display. Steve Mowry, 6-0, destroyer of heavyweight, who is ripping people's limbs off, is buried on the prelims. And Toledo Nogueira, who is a ranked featherweight, is fighting Jesse Neal, a ranked featherweight in our rankings. Two of the top 15 featherweights in the world are fighting in consensus, not just us, anywhere else you want to look. Top 15, buried in the prelims.
And merely far and away the best featherweight in the world, not fighting at the UFC Bellator level until right now.
Yeah, and it's buried on the prelims on the Bellator app or wherever it may be, where we can see. I think it actually may be on Bellator.com. It might be on DAZN, but it's. Do yourselves a favor, Bellator. If you're building a cyborg fight, if you're building a cyborg division, you need to have contenders that people are interested in them fighting. UFC did the same situation with the flyweight division. They had Mighty Mouse Johnson headline cards. Great. That's fantastic. That's what you should do. He's a fighter that deserved it. But then Wilson Hayes would fight on the third fight of the night. And he'd fight on maybe he'd be the preliminary opener. So when he got to the title shot, he had never fought in a main card. There's just one of those examples of fighters that, well, how are we supposed to know who Chris Cariaso is and his one-punch power if we've never seen him fight on the main card? So Bellator is dooming themselves to this situation as well. And, I just want them to I don't know, to kind of get their act together a little bit. Some fighters should be showcased. Some fighters can draw the eyeballs. Jack Swagger, people will watch to see him fight. But then you have to look at a merit-based system where some fighters deserve to fight in the main card because they're that darn good. I think that should be placed higher than the spectacle. But I don't know. I'm just a guy in a Hawaiian shirt. That's the plan.
It's almost like they just kind of randomly throw darts at the wall and decide who's going to be on what cards. If you took this, and I know we're supposed to talk about the two Bellator cards later on, but we'll table that and just do it now, I guess. But if you took like half the fights from Bellator 231 and half the fights from Bellator 232, you actually got a pretty decent card.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You've actually got some names that are worth paying attention to, and some names that you may not know who they are, but hey, they might put together some good fights. So it just doesn't make sense that they already have a pretty thin product. They already don't have but so many names that generate interest outside of the diehard fans. Why do you dilute that product on the same weekend? Is beyond me. Again, because at least they're in the same city this time.
Yes, that's true.
At least it's not LA and Dublin.
There were like 30 fights this weekend. So we're spending the weekend watching fights. What do you do? What do you do with your time, Burgos? Do you watch every one?
Of course.
Can you watch every one?
No, of course not. and to piggyback on your point, Jay, too, and it's weird too. I don't know if you guys noticed this too, like maybe researching for stuff and like research for interviews. So many times I will find guys that were once in Bellator, won in Bellator, and then weren't signed by them. Yep. Like they do it several times. I've seen guys that did it twice and didn't get signed. And Coker is he praises heaped upon him as a guy. He's good at finding talent, developing stars, which he has. And he's doing it a bit with Bellator, but again, pushing Hager, pushing some of these names. the girl from ATT, Laredo, Valley Laredo. No disrespect, but pushing her. Perfect example. I interviewed Jordan Young, a few months back for his last fight. Jordan Young is arguably one of the very elite, best prospects they have. 11-0, a bunch of submissions, fantastic talent. I asked him back then about being on the main card. You can find being on the main card. He's fighting at 233 against Julius Anglicus. That I'm gonna interview him this week. He was on the Contender Series, won LFA light heavyweight champion. 2 talented prospects. One win between one loss between them in like 19 fights, or excuse me, more than that, 20-some fights, prelims. What are you doing? On the main card, I'm looking at it here. No disrespect to anybody. You got King Mo's go away fight. All right, fine. You got Leslie Smith, Arlene Blankow. Okay. John Salters in the main event are fine, but how are you not showcasing Jordan Young and Julius, who you just signed from he could have went to the UFC, you just didn't want him, LFA champion. How are you not pushing these guys? Come on, Bellator.
Yeah, it's kind of the way they operate sometimes just seems totally devoid of logic. So I can't. I honestly just have no idea what the strategy is. It makes me really think there is no strategy. All right, so fellas, let's move on to the speed bag. So all 3 of you gentlemen will be able to answer 3 questions. You will have 10 seconds to answer each question, and this is the perfect time for me to flex my authority, flex my power, and to cut you off if you dare violate. So what I'm
That's why you asked me to be on, so you could do this shit to me, huh?
Exactly. You're invited next week also.
Just for this part too, right? Just for this part.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna bring you on just to do the speed bag next week, and then that's it. All right, so
bag, boom, with cover cut off.
You have 0.5 seconds to answer this question, Jason.
Oh my God! Do I have to go first? I'm not prepared.
That's even better, better. So I'm gonna use my round timer app that I use when I work out. So there will be a bell and whatnot, and it's just not an honor system for keeping time. I'm watching you, Ben. All right, so Jason, we'll start with you. First question: Joe Lauzon snapped the longest losing streak of his career to win in front of friends and family at home. Should this be his? Make sure the prep time is off for this. No prep time. We don't need no prep time. And there we go. So, should this be his swan song? You have 10 seconds.
Yes. Next.
Oh, that wasn't any fun, Steve. That was not any fun. Ben, please show him how it's done. Show him how to answer a question and get so well wrapped into an intelligent conversation that I cut off the time. Ben, I'm counting on you. You've got 10 seconds. Should this be it for Joe Lauzon?
It would be lovely and a storybook ending if it were, but in the end, I mean, he doesn't owe us a great story. He owes his family the best life he can give them.
Oh, that was good.
Oh, wow. Just on time.
I thought I went over. I was surprised. That was a long 10 seconds.
I was hoping you had more to say. Trust me.
No, like that was a long and satisfying 10 seconds, like I say on a lot of dates.
Oh, buzzing.
Oh, wow. So, on that disturbing note, Jay, can you tell me, should this be it for Joe Lauzon?
I mean, this was the perfect.
What?
Sorry, it's a warning when you get under. You know what? Here, how about this? I'll take the warning.
I'm just gonna take.
I'll take the round warning off. Okay, I have the round warning on for 10 seconds.
10-second rounds, man. We got to work on that cardio.
I know. I just changed the settings. All right, so here we go. All right, Jay. Once again, Joe Lauzon, should this be it for him?
It was the perfect moment for him to hang it up. You couldn't ask for anything better. The only thing that would have been better is if you want a post-fight bonus. But just beautiful, Lauzon. Game on.
Oh,
I still like my answer the best, honestly. I gotta say.
Your answer sucks. All right, so I'm gonna start with you for this one, Ben. Wait, wrong one. There we go. Is California making the right call to automatically cancel bouts when a fighter weighs in on fight day 15% above their weight class and go?
I say yes. I like this. No regulatory move towards weight is perfect, but I like ones that do favors to the fighters.
Oh my goodness, the bell has rung. Your time is done, sir. How dare you disrespect the clock? Jason,
What's the question again? Wait, what's the question? I don't see it on the list.
You have 10 seconds here. Is California making the right call to automatically cancel bouts when a fighter weighs in on fight day 15% above their weight class and go?
Yes, I like it. Fighters need to be scared into making the right decisions and being an ultimate professional and doing their job the right way.
Oh, man. Time to spare. You disappoint me, Jason. All right. So Jay, your turn. 15% above the weight class. Should that cancel the fight in California and go?
Yep, this is a great step. The only concern I have is if they try and cut weight on fight day, but otherwise, this is the start to something that could be really helpful for the fighters.
Oh, just in time. Oh, I was about to flex some authority. Perfect timing for you, Jay. All right, fellas, the last question, and Jay, you'll kick this one off. Would Colby Covington actually slap Dana White in the face with the belt if he beats Kamaru Usman and go?
Of course not. He's trying to get his name in the headlines because nobody cares about his fight with Usman. It's a fight that matters, but no one really cares. So sell the fight, but don't hit Dana.
Oh, ooh, you just that last second almost got a chance to cut you off. Good work, Jay. All right, so Ben, you're up next. Will Colby Covington actually slap Dana White if he is going to beat Kamaru Usman?
Absolutely not. He is not Nate or Nick Diaz. He cares a lot. He is gonna say thank you and kiss ass.
Yeah, I was gonna let that one run over a little bit too if you have more to say. 'Cause I like where you were going with that. All right, Jason. So you get the say on this one, at least until I jump in. Tell me, will Colby Covington smack Dana White with the belt if he beats Kamaru Usman?
Hell fucking no, he won't do that. But if he did, how amazing would that be? We didn't get to see Tito and Dana box. Maybe this is the preemptive strike for the Colby and Dana boxing fight.
A promotional angle right there. I like it. I like it a lot. So now, fellas, I am going to change the round time to 30 seconds because I'm going to answer all three questions in 30 seconds. So let's make sure we are good to go. All right, so the first question, should Joe Lauzon hang it up after snapping his losing streak in Boston? Yes, I do believe it's time for him to hang it up. You don't want to hang around too much longer. And when is the UFC coming back to Boston? That's his good luck charm. And next question, California it might be doing the right thing here by canceling fights with a 15% weight overdue. Also, Colby Covington would not smack Dana White. Remember, this is the same guy that turned off the live stream when he caught Dana White with a young lady at the casino table. So there it is. And let's just let you know the bell was going, and I did all of it.
You cheated. You were looking at the clock. Come on. I don't get to see a clock.
I had a clock going, too.
Yeah, see, you're not prepared, Jason.
Oh, my God. I'm following the guidelines here, guys. This is messed up.
Just trash. Just trash. See, you don't podcast with me on a regular basis. Now look at you, just falling apart.
Now I see why I don't anymore.
I'm fighting words.
I am personally offended by that, and you are now demoted to civilian credential.
Wow!
You are out of the
credential as a civilian. That's not bad.
No, you're like a recruiting officer now. You're
He's in the strip mall.
Yeah, you got
the overhead light and the poster.
The dress clothes every day, and you're trying to lure high school students into the storefront to sign them up.
He's between the Goodwill and the Joanne Fabrics. High school. Oh man, that is a fate worse than death right there.
Oh man. So recruiting officer credential. So I'll start with you on this one because we have a couple of things we're going to get to. So we don't want to go a deep dive into the Bellator card because we did just kind of go over that. But Rory MacDonald and Douglas Lima are going to decide two things. One, the winner of the welterweight Grand Prix, and also who has the welterweight title belt in a rematch. So who wins this fight in your eyes?
Well, I mean, I feel I have a good knowledge on this one after having the pros pick coming up on later in the week. So I got like a lot of pins from a bunch of fighters. I talked to Douglas Lima. I'm gonna go with Lima. I just I feel like he's the guy kind of in that right prime surging spot of his career. Rory, I feel like Rory's 2 years from now, it's probably not going to be fighting anymore. Maybe even less. Maybe a year from now, Rory may not be fighting. I feel like he's just winding down this contract and then he's out of here. So I'm not sure what his desire is. I'm sure as a competitor, he wants to do great. He wants to win. But I feel like Douglas Lima, after he lost that fight, he was so close to winning. Maybe one kick away from beating Rory MacDonald and retaining his title. He's been on a fucking crusade to get back to Rory MacDonald and get that title back. That's a lot of desire. And I've even talked to him about it. A lot of people in the industry, fighters, fans, are really finally noticing this guy that's been one of the best welterweights in the world for the last 3-4 years. And they get it. A lot of people are picking him. I'm going to pick him. I think it'll still be highly competitive in another close fight. But I can't deny. I think it feels like a destiny thing that they actually met in the finals after being the last two guys to hold the title.
All right. So, Jay, who wins this fight Saturday?
I'm picking up what Burgos is putting down. I think Lima's gonna work those leg kicks, and it's going to give Rory flashbacks of how he couldn't walk that next week. I think it's going to sap his desire to keep going, kind of in a leg kick version of Robbie Lawler hitting him in the nose repeatedly. I think it's just that memory's gonna come back, and it's gonna. I don't know if I like this. I don't know if I like ruining my next few weeks to do it. But something that I'm curious about. Promotions don't like to root for fighters, but sometimes they kind of actively do. I have to think they're rooting for Lima in this one because Rory he's been a foot out the door for the last year. After he drew a fit, she was like, I don't really like this whole punching thing. I think it would really gut them if they went through this trouble to put this tournament together, the $1 million on the line, the 50-cent champagne, make a new tournament belt, and have the whole whoop-de-doo, and Rory to go, okay, thanks, I won, and bail. Like he could do. We don't know, but it's possible, and it's a conversation we wouldn't be having unless what he already has done and said. I have to figure that they're going to be rooting for Lima so they can do the whole. We have a homegrown champion, and we beat the ex-UFC guy, and our Bellator guy beat the tournament, beat the whole field and everything. I think they're going to be pulling for Lima, and I think I'm expecting him to take it home too.
I definitely didn't even think about the promotional angle on that, like their desire in this. I mean, it seems like Douglas Lima, who's a homegrown star for them, and someone who's low-key been one of the best welterweights in the world for a very, very long time now, would be the one that you think Scott Coker and company would prefer to come out as the winner. So, Ben, are you in agreement with that? And do you think Lima gets it done Saturday?
Yeah, I am emphatically in agreement. So that's 3 of us for Lima in this one. I just don't believe in Rory MacDonald again yet. When you look at him over the last year, he had the very ill-advised attempt to move up and take on Mousasi, where, I mean, it was a demoralizing beatdown. Yeah. Nobody had ever beaten him like that. Nobody had ever done that to him. Then there was obviously the Fitch fight. It was a pretty good fight, but afterwards he had a literal crisis of faith where, he talked about how maybe he didn't want to do this violence thing anymore because of his relationship with his savior. After some soul searching and a quick check of his banking app on his phone, he came back in June and said that he was all back in the violence business and he was ready to give Naaman Gracie what for. He didn't exactly give him what for. He won uncontroversially, but I mean, he didn't beat the shit out of him. I mean, the most interesting thing about the fight was that he so fearlessly went into Naaman Gracie's world there on the ground and just grappled with him for extended periods. Yeah. He just comfortably kind of did the backstroke in the Shark Tank whenever he wanted for 5 rounds. That was my big takeaway from that fight. But there's nothing he has shown me in the 3 fights since the last time he took on Douglas Lima to make me think he is not an older, worse, more worn, and less motivated fighter than he was in beginning of 2018, whereas Lima has looked at least as good, if not incrementally better. So I have Lima in this one, and if Bellator is, playing it straight but secretly hoping Lima wins, I can't fault him for it. Lima's a very good fighter. He's an exciting fighter. None of the usual caveats about Brazilian champions fit here because he lives in Atlanta. He speaks English just fine. He's an interesting and thoughtful dude. Whereas MacDonald, not all of his fights are barn burners, and his personality is 7 different shades of bizarre, depending on what year it is.
So I think it looks like it's unanimous. I'm picking Lima to win this fight, and I want to piggyback off of some of the stuff that you said, Ben, because since that fight against Douglas Lima, I mean, the original fight against Douglas Lima, Rory MacDonald has struggled in ways, at least the Rory MacDonald that we remember as the guy who was the world beater in the UFC up until running into Robbie Lawler and Carlos Condit and some of the names there. That seemed to end in Bellator. And in fact, I would venture to say that it happened before he even got to Bellator. So he ended his UFC run with...
Allow me to interject real quick.
Yeah.
Right after the Lawler fight, he had that weird fight against Stephen Thompson where he tried MNRA rolls for 3 rounds.
Exactly because after the Robbie Lawler fight, where he took an hellacious amount of punishment, and something I don't think he's ever been the same from since, the Wonder Boy Thompson fight, which was just strange and ill-advised in so many different ways, and he looked pretty flat there. Paul Daly, perfect style matchup for him. And he looked good in that, but Paul Daly is the style of fighter that Rory MacDonald should run over 9 times out of 10. Then the Douglas Lima fight, which was a great back and forth fight. Of course, Lima, like you said, Jason, he was 1 kick away from winning that in the final round. He was 1 kick away from disabling MacDonald and making sure he couldn't continue. The Gegard Mousasi fight, just one of the worst decisions, one of the worst ideas at a so-called super fight ever conceived. John Fitch, he should have steamrolled John Fitch. John Fitch at his age should not have stood a chance against Rory MacDonald. Neiman Gracie came in with 9 fights of experience and was able to make it to the decision against Rory MacDonald. So I'm not I'm impressed by the fact that he was able to get on the ground and go jiu-jitsu for jiu-jitsu with him. But still, Roy MacDonald that we know of, the Roy MacDonald that he would have steamrolled Neiman Gracie that night. So I see a Douglas Lima rising that while MacDonald has declined. And when they weren't at their current ability levels, Lima was very close to beating him. So I think a Lima that's gotten better and a MacDonald that's gotten worse. You do the math. I think Douglas Lima wins, and I think he does it pretty violently too. And keep in mind too, his journey through the tournament has been less stressful on his body. He barely cracked a sweat taking out MVP. So
Koreshkov, he finished too.
Yeah, he finished.
That's a hell of a win as well.
I think that went to the 5th round, but still,
he beat him soundly throughout the fight.
Exactly. So, all right, gentlemen. So let's move on to the UFC's event in Singapore, which I'm sure everyone will be awake at 5 a.m. to watch the very first fight on the. Oh, that's right. Oh, you're in Central Time, so you got. No, you're in Mountain Time, right?
No, Central.
You're in Central. Okay, so what's it? 4 for you? 4. Okay. Yeah. So Jason, what's it for you? And Jay, I know you guys live on East Coast time.
It's 5. Yeah.
It's not okay.
It's called. I'll be in bedtime.
You are.
I'm 2. Oh man. So I'm reading. I was thinking it was gonna be 5 Pacific time.
No.
Oh,
it's
5's the main card for you.
East is more important than Pacific. Anthony.
It's 2:00 your time.
Yeah.
I'm asleep, fam. Yeah. Okay. So y'all tell me about this. Y'all tell me what happened. All right. Now. So this isn't exactly the card to that should be appointment viewing, judging by this lineup. But give me one fight, each of you, one fight that stands out to you as something that might be worth tuning into. I'll start with you, Jason.
Camacho Benio Dariush. That's an interesting fight. Camacho's a fun fight. He's a fun guy to watch. Dariush is fairly durable and tough. Not always exciting to watch, but it's an interesting test for Camacho. He'll be going for a 3rd straight win. He's sort of from the region. He's originally from Guam. Guam's kind of closer than usual UFC events with the Singapore and Guam that distance. So maybe he'll have that kind of local regional fanfare. But Yeah, that's the fight. Other than the main event, I'm intrigued by that. I've interviewed him before. Super amazingly nice guy. So yeah, that would be the one I'd like to see.
The people of Guam will take over Singapore this weekend. So, all right, Jay. So I know you did allude to one fight that's kicking off the card, but that you wanted to highlight. But any others, or if you want to talk more about that one, floor is yours.
Well, I don't have a ton to say about that fight. I see it going the distance, which is a rarity for heavyweight fights, but I see that playing out that way. But for anybody who is watching or for not watching the card, you can join me on the play-by-play. I'll be up bright and early to write the whole thing up. So if you missed the fight and don't feel like cruising back, it's on ESPN Plus, so I think you can rewind or whatever. I'll have the whole thing for everybody right there. If you cherry pick the names, you can probably find something that's interesting. But my fight of the night, actually, I do have a good one. King of Kung Fu, Muslim Salikov, is fighting Argentinian Laureano Staropoli. I think that is a striker's delight fight. Salikov is the guy who throws spinning reverse heel kicks. He'll flip in the air to throw stuff. And Staropoli, we've already seen his couple fights in the UFC so far. He beat up on Thiago Alves the last time out and surprised all of us. I think it's going to be a slugfest, so I'm looking forward to that one. And without being mean-spirited or downtrodden or anything,
be mean. Please be mean.
The main event does not inspire confidence for me. I've seen it described by more than one person as a potential grappling style dream matchup. Now, as we know, many times, two high-skilled grapplers engage in a sloppy kickboxing match for 5 rounds because neither wants to take the chance giving up their back, giving up their neck, or getting taken down and not being able to do anything about it. I mean, this looks like it would play out very similarly to how Maia fought Usman, to how Maia fought Covington, to how Maia fought Woodley, all very talented wrestlers that shucked all 49 of his takedown attempts. So I don't want to be a bummer, but Salikov's going to be a firefight. Salikov Staropoli is going to be a battle.
All right,
what do you think, Duffy?
I'm excited to see Ciryl Gane take on Dontel Mays. Well, I'm excited to see Ciryl Gane. He is a Frenchman of African descent. He is a longtime training partner of former UFC champ Francis Ngannou. He won his UFC debut a couple months ago with one of the fastest knockouts in UFC history. I think it was 9 seconds, something like that. Wasn't it?
Gane submitted.
No, never mind. He jumped on him and arm triangled him.
Yes.
He's taking on Dontel Mays. Dontel Mays has 7 career fights, 3 of them on Dana White's Contender Series, which should just tell you 7 career fights, 3 of them on Dana White's Contender Series, which should tell you 2 things: 1, how desperate the UFC is for heavyweights, and 2, how good Dontel Mays isn't really. It's very fitting that his Sherdog profile photo, his eyes are closed in it. And I'm going to sneak in one other one. Sergey Pavlovich versus Maurice Green. I actually am very excited about. The Pavlovich hype train, was derailed, but perhaps a bit prematurely. Alistair Overeem is too much for, even now today, all but about 14 heavyweights in the entire world. So no surprise that he was too much for Sergey Pavlovich. He is a wily veteran who still has all the offensive weapons. I'm interested to see Pavlovich take on Maurice Green. Maurice Green is a very interesting story, kind of a small redemption story from TUF. And I'm, as an old school guy, I'm behind any fighter in 2019 who openly smokes tobacco. That's just kind of odd, kind of like an 1890s baseball type thing. But I'm excited for that fight as well. So it's rare for me to say I'm excited for 2 heavyweight fights on the same card, but I want to see both those.
Yeah, I'm don't really have much to add as far as fights because you guys kind of covered the only ones that really stand out to me. But I will say this in closing for UFC in Singapore: Damian Maia and Ben Askren has all the makings to be simultaneously the best and the worst fight in UFC history. So when you think of peak MMA, you think of Damian Maia versus Ben Askren. get ready for something very strange to happen. It might actually be worth waking up for. All right. So that is going to conclude everything except for, well, we got the buried treasure. So let's quickly run through our buried treasure, the stories that should be getting a little more shine that aren't, or just flying under the radar for whatever reason. So, Ben, I will start with you.
All right. As you may remember, at UFC Sacramento this summer, it was headlined by Jermaine De Randami versus Aspen Ladd in a high-stakes bantamweight matchup. It ended in 16 seconds. De Randami scorched Ladd with an overhand right, went in for kind of one semi-follow-up punch, and Herb Dean was already diving in to end the thing. And there was a bit of controversy. Was the stoppage too soon? Ladd was a pretty good sport about it in the immediate aftermath, but pretty soon thereafter announced that she was going to appeal the decision. And I read that headline, saw it, and promptly forgot about it, because fighters appeal stoppages and judges' decisions on a fairly regular basis. It never goes anywhere. But it's interesting because the decision on that came back within the last week, and Ladd came really close to getting this thing overturned. She made the argument that it was a case of gender-based discrimination, that a men's fight would not have been stopped so inconclusively. After this weekend's past card and some of what we saw in women's fights, it's not out of the realm of possibility, and it's not implausible by any chance. But the 5 members of the California State Athletic Commission who voted on it came in 3-2 for upholding it. The 3 male members voted to uphold, and the 2 female members voted to overturn. Whether that's just organically the way they saw the situation, or the members of the committee were polarized by her argument and kind of went along gender lines, I leave to you. I wasn't in the room for the discussion, though. Damn it, I would love to have been. Maybe I just need to become part of the California State Athletic Commission. But that's your buried treasure for the week for me. A story that we forgot all about 2 or 3 months ago that turned out to have a little bit of legs.
All right. So, Jason, share with us your buried treasure for the week.
I mean, I hope this fits the criteria, but it was just something interesting. It's more like a opinion kind of thing. It's just, I feel despite a very lackluster second season from the PFL, the playoffs have been actually very entertaining. This season has been weird. Fighters miss weight every event, but in these playoffs, especially, they've been entertaining. In PFL 7 a couple weeks ago, the Kayla Harris and Sarah Kaufman train was derailed. Magomed Camaro trying to go for a second straight welterweight title, gets knocked out going into the semifinals. Ray Cooper stays in. He gets a knockout. Ray Cooper is heading to the finals for second year, looking like the Ray Cooper that we were all expecting from last season. This past, PFL 8, the ninja choke by Alex Gill put on Andre Harris, it was fascinating. A surprise. Natan Schultz continues his run and going back to the finals. Lance Palmer's going back to the finals. I don't know. There was a lot of cool finishes, a lot of surprises so far in these playoffs, which I think, as a person that roots for every league and every promotion, wants them all to do well, PFL really needed it. This season has been very meh, but the playoffs have been pretty damn good. And I'm excited now for the next playoff event on Halloween to see what happens with the heavyweights and light heavyweights, because there's a lot of interesting matchups in that one too. And as always, unfortunately, the PFL doesn't get a lot of coverage whenever. So,
all right. So, Jay, share with us your buried treasure for the week.
Well, I want to add a quick thing to Burgos's. Daniel Pineda is a finalist.
Yes.
Daniel Pineda, for those of you unfamiliar, did not fight in the regular season. Mm-hmm. He got a walkover win because his opponent missed weight, and it snuck onto the playoffs without ever fighting. He didn't even have to talk about playoffs.
He hasn't snuck through the playoffs though.
Oh no, he had hammered through the playoffs. That was my I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment, because holy cow. But my buried treasure is another organization that needed a little shine this weekend, that also took place this weekend, that some people saw and a lot of people didn't. BKFC number 8 was headlined by Antonio Silva and Gabriel Gonzaga. two 40-year-olds with 10 knockouts on each side. If you haven't seen it and you know these fighters and you picture it in your head, that's exactly how it played out. That is exactly what happened. It delivered the event delivered in all the right and wrong ways. I mean, everything you expected happened. Did happen. Everything that could go wrong just about did go wrong. It was violent and messy, entertaining. I've seen, in case detractors think that I am anti the event, I have watched every BKFC event to date, and that says something. For a shameless plug, because what are you going to do? I wrote an article called Fractured Fight Facts, where I ripped into the BKFC 8 event. Now, I guess apparently I need to make it clear. It's a parody made in jest for comedic purposes to a few many of you who might have missed the joke. It was a good time. If you had watched that event, you would have understood it deserved the treatment that it received.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there needs to be a lot more appreciation for satire. So anyway, now my buried treasure for the week is maybe this will pick up more traction when it actually takes place, because Thursday Conor McGregor is scheduled to have some sort of press conference in Russia to publicize the introduction of Proper 12 whiskey onto that market. Now, I think this is notable for a couple of reasons. One, look at that with the proper ad.
I got a
for
shift.
Proper
It's
12.
a bubble wrap. There you go.
So part of the reason why I think this is kind of notable is one, ill-advised probably for Conor McGregor to be going to Russia, but still another story. But then also two, he's going to be facing cameras after being specifically named by the New York Times in his second sexual assault accusation. Then on top of that, there's been this back and forth with Frankie Edgar about whether or not they're going to fight in December. Spoiler alert, they are not. But yeah, I think it also speaks to the level of drop off in celebrity, or at least relevance, that McGregor has had in the MMA world as of late, considering that this would have been a much bigger deal had this took place last year. So just thought that was a little interesting note. And with that, we will conclude this episode of Unleashed. So thank you to Jason Burgos, who decided to step in to fill up the fourth chair in the panel. And Jason, if you can tell the good folks where they can find you.
Bronx, New York. That's where you can usually find me. Outside of that, in terms of the journalism realm,
This asshole.
Sherdog.com, of course. This week should be a pretty good, productive, busy week. Like I mentioned, I got the Lima MacDonald pros pick. I believe I got 12 different fighters, guys from one championship, the UFC, Bellator, PFL, Combate Americas, KSW champion, Phil DeFries. So that's pretty good. A lot to get their insight of what they think of one of the more anticipated fights of this year. Got the Douglas Lima article. I haven't gotten to write an article in a bit, and that was fun to get to do. Ashley Yoder, she's fighting UFC Singapore, is coming out this week. Also, I think you guys can confirm the Alex Davis, Goichi Yamauchi, I think, are also coming out this week. Alex Davis is interested in talking to a manager that's been in the sport for 22 years. I asked him a lot of interesting questions about the industry, his thoughts. He wrote a great op-ed in MMA Junkie about some of the fixes that will be worthwhile for the sport. So talk to him about that. And that's pretty much it. And next week, I'll be doing a lot of UFC 244 coverage. I'll be at the workouts and the media day, which should be fun, and get some good content for Sherdog next week.
All right, cool. So, Jay, tell the good folks where they can find you as well.
Well, like Mr. Burgos, you can find me at Sherdog.com. All you got to do is
not
go
in
to
the Bronx. Oh, damn.
No, not in the Bronx. Brooklyn. No. You can go down to the drop down and find me on the list. Jay Petrie, there I am. Basically, in the MMA world, I'm everywhere you need me to be.
All right. And Mr. Ben Duffy, where can everyone find you?
Well, you can find me in Crush City, USA. I won't bother showing the ring again. Online, you can find me on Sherdog. I am an editor and regular contributor there. I'm in the drop-down menu. Or you can find me on Twitter at Benjamin Duffy.
All right, cool. So I am Ant Walker. You can find me on Twitter at Ant Walker MMA. Obviously, you can find me on the Walkout Network because you're watching that now because that's where the show is. But you can find most of my work on Sherdog.com. There probably won't be a Trenches this week because I'm about to move, so I got to do a lot of. Ooh, almost knocked the mic over.
He's moving already.
A lot of packing and everything. So rough week ahead for your man's right here. Oh man, this is gonna suck. Now. Other than that, Ask Ant, and Ask Ant will still be coming out. I'll still do the good, bad, and the ugly, of course. Probably gonna lean toward Bellator on that because I might sleep through UFC Singapore. You just don't know. We have no idea what to expect. But anyway, you know what you got to do. You got to stay beautiful. You got to stay positive, and you got to stay sexy. I will see you when I see you. Peace.
You do that here too. You take
I do.
that
This is my channel. I do
that
this
was supposed
everywhere.
to be a
I do this
Trenches
everywhere.
special.
No, it was my thing. It's always my sign.
Pouring out that finish all the time.
It's
everywhere.
always my sign off. This is why we don't need to work together, Jason.